Yes,
yeah,
we can.
that's all fine.
Excellent. Right. So I'm Emma Tetlow. I've worked in Hillingdon for the past 4 years. I just need to get my act together here. Hang on a moment. I do beg your pardon. There we go. That's it. I'm sorted now. I've worked in the area for the past 4 years since February 2018. And just to give you an idea of sort of the area that I'm responsible for within HS2, which does extend further east than Hillingdon, I'm responsible for the whole of the heritage in Area West, which is from Euston approaches to Harville Road, which crosses three different areas. So we have quite a lot of built heritage in Area East and Central, some very famous cemetery, a very famous cemetery at Kensal Green, and then we move into Area West, where we've had the majority of the archaeological works. We haven't had much excavation at all in Area East, or a little bit where we've encountered some bits and pieces while we've been undertaking works, but most of the excavation has been in Area West, which is between West Ruislip Portal, west, just sort of across the road from West Ruislip Station, to the area that Ian was just talking about at Harville Road in Hillingdon. So Area West, we had, as part of the works for CSJV, who I worked for the first 2.5 years, we had 7 areas in total, and 2 areas were subject to 3 and 2 separate phases of evaluation separately. So this is where you can see here West Ruislip Golf Course with Thames Sewer Diversion, which is in this area here, and sorry, on the wrong screen there, and also Ruislip's Northern Sustainable Placement, where we had 3 areas. We also had a phase of mitigation, which yielded evidence here at New Year's Green, which yielded basically 6,000 years of activity from the Neolithic all the way through to the late medieval period. And the CSJV scope was really completed in 2020 when we handed the legacy over to SCS Railways, who I also work for, to complete these works. So again, this is sort of just an overview of what the legacy SCS have inherited from CSJV is. We have construction integrated recording, which is an advance, a hand watching brief in 4 areas, and a package of bespoke works at West Ruislip Golf Course. So what did we find? Very interesting actually, and sort of between CSJV and SCS, well, with the CSJV legacy and the current works with SCS, we continue sort of to push our horizons back further. One of the most exciting finds with SCS has been possible Middle Paleolithic evidence, which we're awaiting confirmation of. We have Mesolithic evidence from long blade lithics from the terraces of the River Pin at West Ruislip. We'll be undertaking further works there this year. We have limited evidence from Neolithic, surprisingly, actually, given the wealth of sort of Mesolithic evidence, and also we have a complete paucity of Bronze Age absence. Mid to late Bronze Age, quite dispersed, but again at West Ruislip Golf Course, which we actually found late in the CSJV day, we have quite a lot of evidence of cremations and also possible domestic activity in the shape of roundhouses. And again, apart from our fantastic hoard, we have very little evidence of the Iron Age at all. Romano-British again, relatively limited. Medieval, we have lots of evidence, which is fantastic, and also some early post-medieval evidence. We also wanted a detailed death space assessment prior to these works taking place that looked at the medieval evolution of the whole area, which yielded some particularly interesting results and suggests that actually, given the fact that we are within the N25 and this area has been subject to quite a lot of development in the past 150 years or so, we're actually still seeing a relatively a landscape of some antiquity. So anyway, let's go to the really exciting bit, which is the Hillingdon Hoard and this 11th hour encountering. So one of my roles, I'm going to tell you a little bit about being an archaeologist. Well, I say an archaeologist, an archaeological consultant on a large-scale infrastructure project. One of my roles as part of the CSJV works, because this is found when I work with both CSJV and SCS, which was the case for a while, is that I also worked as a black hat, which is a frontline supervisor who is responsible for health and safety across the site. So as well as sort of making sure that that the archaeological works are being done to sort of the appropriate standards, I also sort of go in and check that the site is safe and for the archaeologists to work, and also that if there has been sort of any sort of inclement weather, that we won't do any damage to the archaeology by going out to work on site that day. So as it suggests here, on the evening of the 27th of August and the early morning of the 28th of August, it rained extremely heavily, typical for what was an August bank holiday. And it became apparent that during the excavation that we wouldn't actually be able to work that morning. But I thought, well, I'm actually going to go and carry on with my daily checks anyway, having a look at what archaeology we found, sort of having a look at the sort of standard of excavation, making sure that we're satisfied what's been excavated and how it's been excavated. Access was the predominant issue here was that access was problematic. It was very wet, the trenches were waterlogged, and the conditions were generally poor, so we weren't going to work. So anyways, we walked across one of the trenches, and I should just add, they were quite waterlogged, and just to give you an idea that these little stakes that we put into the archaeological interventions are to ensure that small furry creatures or amphibians that fall into the trenches can happily escape. So as I walked across the trench with my colleague, we sort of walked across, having a look at the archaeology, having a look at the general conditions. We sort of encountered what was a greeny blue patch of material on the bottom of the trenches. We thought that's strange. In the first instance, I said, oh, it's possibly Vivian, right? Not sort of paying much attention. Then she sort of got into the trench and we had a quit, and she said, come over here and have a look. And in this case, there really was something at the end of the rainbow that appeared after the rain. And as we were closer, the heavy rain had revealed this collection of small metal discs, which were quite curious. And as we smoothed the soil away, it became immediately apparent there was some sort of coin, and there were lots of them. And obviously we're sort of thinking, goodness me, a rarity in itself to encounter something like this in an archaeological context. And the fact that it had been washed away by the rain was quite sort of quite incredible. And we had a good look. Obviously we've got a lovely pen there for scale, and we're obviously very excited. We really realised that we had to get something in relatively swiftly to get that excavated. So as soon as conditions were suitable, the archaeologists came in and excavated the find. So what we did next, that's a lovely picture of the hoard as soon as it had emerged from the ground. So as there were more than 10 coins, and this is defined as treasure under the Treasure and is reportable under the Treasure Act, and as such governed by common law. The Treasure Act is not disapplied by the High Speed Rail Act, so we had to work as we would do normally if we'd found this, if we'd encountered this find. We contacted the coroner to report the find and discussed it with our stakeholder, the Greater London Archaeological Advisory Service and the Portable Antiquity Scheme, for their advice. The finds are removed and stored in a safe place across Bank Holiday weekend, and subject to much conversation. At this point, I had not got a clue what these things could have been. I actually looked at them to start off with, and because they were so highly stylised, and there was something on the back that looks like the White Horse at Lambourne, I thought they might have been Anglo-Saxon. But a very entertaining conversation with Sandy Kidd later said, no, he said, Emma, I think these are flat linear Potins, and Sandy was indeed correct. So a couple of weeks, we sort of there was much excitement within our small group. Obviously, we didn't discuss this. We got on board a team to deal with them. So that's myself, our conservator Pieter Greaves, who also worked on the Staffordshire Hoard, and David Holman, who is probably the preeminent specialist on flat linear Potins in the British Isles. And I must say, he's provided me much of the information I'm about to talk to you about today. So what have we got? So we took these, the actual Potins themselves were taken to the art gallery, the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, where Pieter was based at the time, working for Drake on Heritage. And the fact that they were fresh, she was very excited, the fact that they were from freshly excavated. And she undertook an initial assessment on the condition of the coins and what conservation they were likely to have needed. The purpose of the conservation was not to make the coins look new, but to preserve, to sort of clean them up and leave them as they are, and to ensure that the design and any other of the information contained on them was visible. The assessment showed that the coins were not actively corroding, but as you can see from the images, the surface designs were not visible due to heavy soiling and older corrosive product. But before she started any of the treatments, she wanted to ensure that the finds were fully documented. In this case, she took a photograph of both sides of the coin. So as you can see here, a selection of the coins with a I can't remember the proper name. The front and the back photographed. And again, this was to take notes and to provide as much information as possible to the specialists, because I should add again, at this point we were still it was still during the pandemic, so obviously sort of contact had to be kept to the minimum. But I've got a lovely little video here of cleaning the coins. Hope it works. So it was undertaken using a natural berberis thorn, which is a shrub which grows at the sea, and it yields a very sort of vivid orange fruit. And you can see as it speeds up the removal of the soil. And he has many sort of tools and cleaning items that she can, but have his berberis because you can't do any damage because the thorn will break first. She used wooden toothpicks occasionally, but again, very careful coin. And then to actually help sort of the disaggregation of the soil, she applied a small amount of acetone before the berberis with a little bit of water. So also several of the coins within the hoard were broken, and the multiple she undertook a program of rejoining to attempt to reconstruct as many as possible. And as you can see from this image here, the fragments were rejoined quite successfully in some cases and using a conservation grade adhesive. After the joining, after all the soil was removed, the rejoining was complete and the coins were documented again through another series of photographs, which are all provided to David, the specialist, to provide a full record of both the conservation treatments and obviously the coins themselves. The images were all sent over to David so he could start his analysis. Now, I think this is where this sort of the actual process of sort of producing them is where they're particularly interested, because they're not stamps; they're actually sort of they're actually sort of formed within a die. So they have a high tin content. They're a high tin content bronze coin. They're the earliest base metal coins that have been produced in Europe, and they were not struck as I suggested. They were from dies, but cast in strips and moulds. The moulds were probably made in paired strips emanating from the mould entrance, which is why you get some of these little sort of interesting sprues, which I'll come to shortly on the edge of each coin. Sorry, I've just skipped ahead there. They were probably made from, the moulds themselves were probably made from clay, but a bronze Potin mould has been found in France. And in French examples, the coin were cast in paired strips, excuse me, as shown on the slide. So here we come to these sort of sprues that we were talking about. So as you can see on the image here, you've got the sprues, and it varied on which side the sprues were actually sort of located. These are both in the centre of the coin here, not the, although no, that's, yeah, in the centre of the coin, not on the upper, that's on the upper surface and that's on the centre of the coin. And as you can see here, you've got two that are actually from the end. Being cast in strips does give them some very strange shapes, with sort of lengthy adjoining sprues attached, as you can see here. And just to give you an idea, the strips are separated into individual coins, either by snapping or cutting, which again, where you get some of these sort of more sort of let's say less clean detachments. And this can be seen from several coins in the Hillingdon hoard, which display part of the edge next to the coin strip. So here we've got it here, and again you can see actually there's some of the effects of the casting process, which should also come to shortly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the development of British flat linear Potins, and they're all ultimately based on Bronze Age coins minted in Marseille in France sometime before 175 BC. On the left, the head is a low side, bulging on to the right. As you can see, of the coins here, where you've got the original ones from Marseille with a much clearer head of Apollo, and as you get to our flat linear Potins, it almost morphed into something unrecognisable as a head or even a bull. Most of the Potins are produced in Kent, but there are indications that some flat linear Potins have been produced elsewhere, and may actually have been sourced in the Thames Valley itself or the Essex and Hertford. The first series of Potins produced in Britain, indeed fairly certainly the earliest coins produced in Britain, are those Kentish primary or Thurrock types, which are likely to have started by no later than 150 BC. And sometime before 100 BC, these dumpy coins are replaced by much thinner coins with more degenerate designs, which we now call the flat linear types, as we see in our Hoard from Hillingdon. Over a period of several decades, the flat linear Potins gradually evolved into a wider variety of forms within the head and the bull, now facing either way with no obvious preference. The diameter and the weight of the coins is also slowly reduced for whatever reason, and there is a sort of a trend towards a smaller coin also. The Hillingdon hoard itself, after analysis, was determined to be late in the flat linear sequence, and also demonstrates a change from coins with still relatively large flans to those which are much smaller, or which have of which there are many examples in this hoard. So here's an idea of some of the coins from the coin types present in the Hillingdon hoard. The earliest coins in the hoard belong to subgroup F2, which are here, and the latest are G3. Now I believe the G3 ones are almost sort of up to the sort of quite close to the Roman invasion. And the degeneration of the designs is very evident, with the head and bull now being all but unrecognisable, as you can see. It's, as I suggested when we first saw them, we really sort of hadn't got a clue what the representation was. There are very few examples of the later G3, it's a G3 coins at Hillingdon, indicating that the hoard must have been deposited before they were widely available. So the composition of the hoard can be analysed in various ways. Probably the most clearest way to be demonstrated in a graphic format. It shows these here show the splits between the hoard at group, subgroup, and type level. These show that group G forms the largest group in the hoard. G1 is the commonest subgroup, and G1-5 is the commonest type by some distance, accounting for nearly half the total. So we are actually seeing quite late sort of coins, which came in really handy for dating. Again, exactly how many coins are represented by the hoard is uncertain, as there are quite a lot of that were broken or incomplete. There were 25 complete, which are broken, and some of which have broken or had edges sort of removed, whether that's actually in antiquity or sort of a taphonomic process. There are many fragments represent at least a further 55 coins, giving a minimum figure probably of about 329 coins in the hoard. And a lot of the smaller fragments were quite impossible to identify or match. The broken incomplete coins are important, as for some time, looking at evidence from other hoards, it's whether or not they might have been deposited in this state or have been there, as I say, as I've suggested, from a taphonomic process or damage. But it's previously impossible to be sure what the case is. If they are actually deliberately broken, it would bring them in line with deliberate deposition of broken incomplete artefacts, such as those found at Snettisham. The Hillingdon hoard contained fragments right to the undisturbed base of the deposit, indicating that they've been presumably been deposited in this state, which provide the best and clearest evidence yet that this practice also applied to these coins. So again, we've actually got some really interesting sort of results from this hoard that are actually contributing to our wider knowledge of flat linear Potins and their use and application across the southeast. So here we've got sort of an example of the different coins. This hoard, it's sort of most of the hoard consisted largely of coins that all were already known, with 3 previously unrecorded minor varieties. The most prominent of the new varieties is this bull, looking as though it's wearing a pair of skis, which is quite interesting, as described by our specialist. And the closest parallel for this design is from the Birchington hoard. Again, we've got another sort of highly stylized bull here, and we've also got striations caused by from the casting process on both sides, and this would probably have been part of sort of it would have been formed in mould, and it's possible that this was actually a wooden mould. Again, further casting flaws, as you can see here, where we've got these sort of little holes where the molten material didn't quite fill the cast itself. And again, errors in the adverse side of the coin, where you can actually sort of see like the bull itself is very poorly represented. And then finally, one of the coins had a head where the marker seemed to change its direction. So it looks as though it's sort of kind of it was indecision, which has resulted in the way the head was facing, and actually it's sort of completely taken away sort of the actual form of the head itself. So as you can see, it's quite interesting to actually be able to see the production methods that were used and sort of where the flaws sort of manifested. And it's one of my favourite things about archaeology, actually, that you actually see sort of where mistakes have been made. One of the other great finds that we had from one of our other sites was a tile where a dog had clearly run across a set of tiles. And it sort of brings the actual story, gives the story sort of a very human side to it. So anyway, as I just come to my last couple of slides, this map shows where flat linear Potins have been recovered in the UK. This itself is quite interesting. The earliest hoards are generally found in Kent. The earliest fall is North Foreland, which is this dark blue circle just here. There we go. And it terminates in Group D, which is probably one of the earliest sort of sets of Potins, one of the early, probably a deposit for 80 bits, and this is particularly early, and also one of the largest hoards encountered in the UK. The actual sort of Thames sort of here cluster all around the same date and are largely Group F. So the fact that ours is within the Thames Valley and a little bit later as sort of Group G is actually quite interesting in itself. So just to finish off, this is just how our flat linear hoard, our hoard of flat linear Potins sort of compares with those of other areas. Again, as I've suggested, and this quite clearly demonstrates here that the majority, such as Sunbury, Snettisham, Tetlow, are actually generally quite early, where sort of Hillingdon is much later in the chronology itself. So that's it. If anyone's got any questions.
That was fantastic, Emma. Thank you.